on today's episode of All About Life with Danielle Brown.
After our second miscarriage, I 1000% was like, this is my fault. This is my body. I can't give my husband children. Well, if I admit that I'm broken, then people are going to look at me as I'm broken, rather than looking at me as a mom who is fighting for her babies and for her future babies. And no one should be told to try for a third. And if you lose a third child, then we'll do testing.
Hailey, welcome to the podcast and show. How are you?
Good. Just, hanging in there, relaxing.
Hanging in there. You know who's hanging in there is your sweet baby. You are due so soon.
Yes,
so soon.
Days now.
That is crazy. Tell us her name, the actual due date. Like, what is the timeline looking like?
Yeah, so her due date is not till March 30th, but things are progressing pretty quickly. Like, I don't want to get too TMI, but things are progressing. And it's looking like she will be here early. So we are on baby watch any day now. And kind of on doctor's orders to rest and let her come and do her thing. But our baby girl, Leona, should be here any day now. So yeah, we're just waiting.
Any day now. Well, thanks for taking the time to come and chat with us here on All About Life. So you have bags are packed, I assume. Yours,
hospital bags are packed.
Goodness.
Everything, our snack bag is packed.
Very important.
And everything is ready to go. Her nursery is 98% finished.
So
there's a few things left to do.
I mean, you thought you had like a whole month left, so I'm impressed that you're like, hey, we are on time, we're on schedule here.
Yeah. So and everything in our room is set for her, like by our bed and everything like that. So yeah, we are in the final stretch.
Goodness, I am so excited for you. I'm excited for anyone when they're welcoming a sweet baby into this world, but so much of your life, and I don't want to say your story, right? Because like, it's not a story. This is like what's happened to you. And really what we're chatting about today is that this is like a miracle for you. Like, Jesus is here because this isn't your first pregnancy.
No.
It's not your second pregnancy. And you've been so open about your struggles with miscarriage and what that looks like, and also carrying a baby full term and having a baby after having loss. And so if you don't mind, let's kind of hop right in. Would you mind taking us back to like, you got married, you told me right before we chatted, like you were ready to start having some babies. And I don't think anyone, even though we all kind of know it might be hard to get pregnant or miscarriage is a possibility, like we don't plan for that. We're not.
Yeah, that's not really something that we like go into trying for a baby of like, well, I'm going to try for a baby, but there's a chance. Like we all go into it just like, oh, I'm ready to have a baby. Like, and we see everyone getting pregnant like within the first 2 months or accidentally, or that you're like, oh, it must be easy to get pregnant. But realistically, like it's a miracle that women do get pregnant with how just like the reproductive systems work. It is such a miracle that pregnancy happens. But yeah, for us, I mean, we got married in 2019 and May of 2019. And I was like, let's have babies. Let's go. I've wanted to be a mom since I was old enough to hold a baby. Like I knew being a mom was part of my calling. And I had worked with kids so much, like overseas and like nannying and babysitting. Like I just knew it. My husband was like on the fence about it. He was kind of the person who was like, well, I want like, a year minimum or maybe 2 or 3 of just the 2 of us to like travel, explore. And so in our first year of marriage, we traveled so much together. And we kind of just jammed everything we could in that, like not knowing, you know, that we would start trying the next year.
Right. Take full advantage.
But in 2020, January of 2020, we decided to get my IUD removed and to see what happened. And we had just moved to Colorado, so we were in a new state and didn't really have any friends yet at that point, and like the pandemic was about to start and we didn't know that, but we knew that we wanted to try for kids, and we were naive and thought it would be easy, it would be fun, it would be what every movie makes it seem to be. So we started trying end of January 2020. And August of 2020, we got pregnant the first time. Honestly, in disbelief, because even though it was like 8 months, it felt like forever. Like when you're trying, 2 months feels like a year. So like 8 months to us did feel like a year. So we were so excited, you know, finally got pregnant after thinking like, oh, it's never going to happen, you know, what the heck. And then in September of 2020, we had our first miscarriage. And I was actually in Washington, D.C. for a wedding by myself, staying at one of my mother-in-law's like friends' houses in D.C. And I'd come home from the wedding and started to have a miscarriage. And so I went to the ER by myself because COVID wouldn't allow anyone who wasn't like a blood relative or spouse go into the ER with you. So, you know, my husband wasn't there with me and I was not staying with family. So I had to go by myself. And my flight, I left the ER around like 3 a.m. and my flight back to Colorado was at like 5 a.m. So I literally got my bags and went straight to the airport, flew home to my husband, who had been up all night long. One of his best friends had come over and like stayed with him through the night, so that he wouldn't be alone, and really just kind of came home to brokenness for both of us. You know, and everyone just kept telling us like, you know, it happens.
Right.
You know, there is a chance of this. It doesn't mean something is wrong. It doesn't mean like you can't get pregnant again, all these things. Trying to be encouraging of just like, hey, the chances of it happening a second time are so small. Don't let this defeat you. All with such good intent. And so we did. We took a few months to just fully process like that I had carried our baby and that I had birthed our baby and that, you know, we were no longer having that baby. And so we named our firstborn, and we did some things to help us. So we both got tattoos for her. We thought it was a girl. So we both got tattoos for her. We named her, everything like that. And then in April of 2021, we got pregnant a second time. So about 6 months later. And then in March of 2021, we miscarried a second time. Right at both miscarriages were at the exact same like mark in pregnancy. So, you know, to us, that was like, okay, not only did we miscarry a second time, but we can't make it past this point in the pregnancy for some reason.
Right.
So we went to our OB and she pretty much said, try for a third. And if you miscarry again, we'll do some testing. And we both, like, we went home and we were like, we don't agree with that. Like, something in our gut is telling us this is not okay. And that we need to advocate for not only like for me and my body, but for our future babies. And no one should be told to try for a third. And if you lose a third child, then we'll do testing. So we kind of took that and that was like, you know, beginning of April, and we started finding fertility clinics in Colorado, and every fertility clinic we found had like a 6 to 9 month waiting list just for a Zoom consult, like not even an in-person consult. And so it was like, okay, we can see you in August over Zoom, but then your in-person won't be till like potentially October. And we were like, okay, like we'll just put our names down on all these waiting lists. And, you know, in the case that something happens, we'll do it. And we had one that we like, we knew people who had gone to this fertility clinic. We had met people who had amazing stories of this fertility clinic. It was the #1 rated clinic in Colorado, #3 in the US. And we were like, there's absolutely no way that we get a spot. And we got a call from them about 2 days later saying, we had a cancellation. Can you guys come into the office next week? And we were like, yes,
absolutely.
We will clear our schedules. We are there. And we did. We went, and right away they started all the testing. And within that first month, by the second week of May, we had an answer as to why I was miscarrying. We had run every single test on both my husband and I, and we had an answer. And we had here is the problem, and here is how we fix it. And so there was a reason I was miscarrying, and it was something that needed medical attention, and we needed help to get pregnant. And so we did undergo medicated IUI in order to get pregnant. And we had our first round of IUI in June, and it was unsuccessful, which, if anyone in the fertility community knows, like, an unsuccessful round of fertility treatments feels like another miscarriage.
Right.
So I honestly didn't know if I'd be able to do another one. So we kind of were like, okay, we'll do one more. And if it works, it works. If it fails, this has been almost 2 years, we're going to take a break. So we did a second round of IUI the end of June, beginning of July. And at the end of July, we found out we were pregnant, and we are about to have that little miracle baby. So yeah.
And now look at you, days away. But I feel like by the time people get to listen and watch this, you're going to have your sweet baby in your arms, holding her and putting her to sleep and changing all of her diapers. But there's so much about what you went through and what you and your husband's process was that I think, unfortunately, can relate to a lot of women. But in a good way, like, you're not alone. Like, people do face this. Take me back to when the IUI process didn't work the first time, and you're like, for anyone who's gone through it, it feels like another loss. I can't imagine, like, just what you physically have to go through, what you're mentally going through. For those of us who haven't experienced that, like myself, kind of walk us through what that process did to you.
Yeah. And I mean, it is like a very, an IUI is kind of the precursor to IVF. And for my husband and I, if our second IUI had failed, we would have gone to IVF. And so for me, I was not ovulating when my body should have. I was ovulating super late and releasing way too mature of eggs. So my eggs were not chromosome like perfect. So if I continued to just get pregnant naturally, I would have continued to miscarry because my baby's chromosomes were not normal. They were abnormal because they were way too mature in the process of being released and being fertilized and everything. So for us, IUI looked like going on the maximum dose of letrozole, which there's like a few different medicines that they use. There's Clomid, letrozole, and I think one other. But for me, the highest dose of letrozole was what worked and what my body reacted to. So I had to be, the first day of your period, and then you start your letrozole. And it is hormones, and it's hormone therapy, which does mess with your body chemically. So it's very emotional and very hard on your body. And then I had to go in every other day for an ultrasound to measure and monitor the growth of my follicles and my eggs. And then once one or two, like the goal was 2 for us, but at least 1 follicle, once it reached around like 18 to 20, I think it's millimeters or centimeters, I don't remember. I was then given a shot to do in my stomach, which was an HCG trigger shot that told my body to release that egg and to ovulate. So we went home, did my trigger shot, and then 36 hours after the trigger shot, we went into the office. My husband gave his sample. They cleaned it, washed it, and took only the fertile parts of his sample. And then about an hour later, I came in and they used a really long catheter and they put it right into your uterus, his sample. And then you lay there for about 10 minutes waiting. And then not every woman will do this, but I did. I was on 200 milligrams of progesterone every day starting that day. And then I was on 2 milligrams of estrogen as well. And if the IUI works, you continue those medications until around 12 weeks. If the IUI does not work, then you quit those medications when you get a negative pregnancy test. So for our first round, it did not work. So I did quit progesterone and estrogen. And then I just waited for my period to come. And then you call and then you come back in, do another ultrasound, and you start the whole entire process again. So it's very hard on your body, emotionally, physically. It's a lot of hormonal drugs that are affecting, your mood swings, affecting everything about it. It's also hard because when you're trying naturally for a baby, you're kind of getting an aspect of surprise of like, oh, we're just having sex all the time. It's fine.
Right. Yeah.
I might miss my period. But with this, like, your doctors literally tell you, hey, on September 23rd, take a pregnancy test. If it's negative, call us when you get your period. If it's positive, call us and come in for blood work. So you don't really have an element of surprise. You also, leading up to the IUI, like 3 to 5 days before the IUI, you have to abstain from sex, so that your partner's sample is hopefully as fertile as possible. And so you don't really get that fun either.
Yeah.
You don't really get like the intimacy with your partner either. Everything is scheduled, everything is planned, everything is timed out to a T of like your trigger shots at 10 p.m., which means your IUI will be at 10 a.m. 36 hours later, and things like that. That it's kind of just, it's very draining. It's very hard. It's hard to not hyper focus on if it worked or not. And, you're doing everything, you're taking the guesswork out of trying of, am I actually ovulating? Did we have sex in the fertile window?
Right.
All these things. You're being told, hey, we know you're ovulating. We know you ovulated because we saw the egg. And we know that your husband's sample had 10.8 million sperm. So you should be pregnant, and your mind kind of goes to this, it didn't work. So why am I not pregnant? Like, we had every single factor going for us and we had every single thing happen, but I'm still not pregnant. And so it does kind of feel like another loss of, this should have worked, but it didn't. So what is wrong with my body? Like, why am I not reacting to these drugs? Why am I not reacting to the doctor's protocol? Why am I not, And so for us, it was like, do we try again or do we take a break? And we both, my husband and I both agreed, one more round. And if that one doesn't work, then we do need a break and we do need time to process that.
Right.
We might be going into IVF and we might be having to, take out a loan to pay for IVF or things like that. And so, it's a lot, and it is a difficult process to go through. And not a lot of women are open about going through fertility treatments. There's definitely a community of women struggling with infertility and fertility. But outside of that, it is really hard to find women, on social media, in person, who are willing to share that they're going through that. And so it does feel very lonely too. And it feels very heartbreaking because you don't want to be the person to be the bearer of bad news and be like, oh, well, we're going through IUI, we can't get pregnant, yada, yada, yada. But you also don't want to be silent about it as well. So it's very hard.
Yeah. Why do you think there's shame in, I mean, you admit, like you just noted, like you're like, why isn't this working for me? Like, where you're almost like, did you blame yourself? Did you blame your body? Did you question, why can't I do this? Especially after testing, it's like, good news, there's an answer. Bad news, it's you. Like, do you feel like almost as a woman, you failed yourself, your family, your husband? And is that why some women, it's just too hard to talk about, because maybe there's shame or embarrassment or just disappointment?
I would for sure say that is definitely a part of it. I know after our second miscarriage, I 1000% was like, this is my fault. This is my body. I can't give my husband children. God put a calling on my heart to be a mom, and I can't do it. My body is failing me. My body is not capable of carrying babies. And just completely blaming my body and myself. And that was hard for my husband and I, because too, I was like, you're doing nothing wrong. Your body's perfect. Mine is imperfect. Mine is failing. Mine is getting rid of our babies. Like, it's my fault. And, there is kind of that guilt of like, I can't do this. And I definitely think too, after our first failed IUI, I felt that even more of like, even with doctors' help, I couldn't get pregnant.
Like, it should have worked.
Right. Like, it really should have worked. Like, in our first IUI, like, they aim for 10 million sperm. And our first IUI, we got like 22 million. And so our odds were like amazing for it to work. And it didn't. And, it literally was like, okay, well, my husband was perfect. It's me. Like, I am the problem. I cannot carry these babies and I cannot get pregnant. And it also was kind of a questioning of God as well, of like, God, why would you place such a strong desire on my heart to be a mom, but to not allow me to have babies of my own, and to not allow me to carry a child, and to allow me to lose two babies? In our second IUI, I really did have to go into it of, okay, my body is not a failure. My body is not broken. My body can do this. My body will do this. And trusting that, God had opened the doors for this fertility clinic, and that God had a reason for it. And we went into our second IUI, and my husband's sample, we only got like 10.2 million. And we were like, oh my God, last time we got 22 million. This time we're only getting half that amount. Like, the odds are against us. It's going to fail again. And kind of really disappointed. And it worked. And it did get us pregnant. And it was kind of this confirmation that my body did work and that I could do it. But I think there are a lot of women, especially in the infertility community, that we do feel shame and we do feel guilt. And it is, especially if you're around women who are getting pregnant or who have children already, or who, don't need fertility treatments, it is a lot of shame and guilt, because you're looking at what your body should be doing and what it should look like. And then you look at what you're going through, and it's like, okay, my body is not working the way it should be. So, if I talk about it, then it brings light to kind of the brokenness of our bodies, rather than showcasing this like woman, powerful, able to have babies. But it showcases not all women are capable of having babies, and not all women are able to get pregnant naturally and on their own, and so it definitely has shame to it. And it has this kind of like, well, if I admit that I'm broken, then people are going to look at me as I'm broken, rather than looking at me as a mom who is fighting for her babies and for her future babies, and for a mom who is advocating for herself and her body in a world that, you know, just kind of wants to put us down. So yeah.
Oh, that was so good. I want to talk more about that, of like you like being a warrior, not just you, but all these moms who, like you said,
Yeah.
you went through way more than the average woman to like have your own baby. But you did mention this a few times, so I want to circle back. How did this process affect your relationship with your husband? Like, I mean, you mentioned you're like, it's not super sexy, right? Like, it's not like you're getting to have sex to get pregnant. It's everything is on a schedule. There's not a lot of spontaneity there. There's not a lot of build up there. You're trying to like,
and your husband literally has to go into a room and give a sample
and
to
then
make
you're
your
like
baby.
turkey baster with like potential babies in there. You're like,
Right.
wow, like you're like, let me wear some lingerie instead of this like hospital gown. So not only how did it affect physically, but so much more than that. Like you said, your body is working, you're doing everything you're supposed to. Mine is failing. I feel like I let my husband down. How did that affect you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely, honestly, we struggled, especially after our first miscarriage, because we had only been married about a year and a half, you know, coming up on 2 years of marriage. And up until that point, we hadn't really gone through something that traumatic together, you know, and you can't prepare for how you and your partner are going to handle trauma. That's not really a conversation you can just openly be like, oh, how do you handle grief and trauma? Like, great, we're compatible. You know, you can't really openly ask that. And I'm kind of an internal processor. And I tend to wait till I'm at a breaking point and then I break. My husband is a external processor, and I also am not super emotional, and my husband is emotional. And so for us, like especially after that first miscarriage, it kind of drove us apart from one another for a little bit, because he was wanting to verbally process and I was wanting to just mentally process. He also, you know, I was wanting to kind of find people to talk to about it who had related, and he kind of wanted to just talk to our families and friends. And on top of that, I had physically gone through the miscarriage by myself in DC, and he was not with me, so he did not see the blood and the pain and the tears and the cramping and the trauma physically that my body went through, where I did. And I did go through it physically, and he didn't. So not only were we processing things different emotionally, but I was processing a physical trauma, and he was processing this mental and grief of a loss. And so for me, you know, I'm now bleeding for 5 more days, continuing to pass our baby, and having to see that every time I go to the bathroom. And he doesn't, you know, and he's not having to wear pads every day and carry that with him. And so it did kind of create a disconnect, because he didn't understand how to relate to the physical trauma that I was going through, and I didn't know how to share with him what I was going through. And it took time, and it really did take us coming together and figuring out how we could honor our baby and how we were going to move forward, and, you know, figuring out how to be open with each other and how to communicate that. You know, and it did take a lot of individual growth in our relationship with the Lord, our prayer lives, and then it took a lot of growth for us coming together, you know, and not just, okay, I'm going to grow, you're going to grow, but now we're going to grow and we're going to get through this. And then our second miscarriage was kind of just like a punch in all the progress we had made with each other, of like, cool, let's see how strong you guys are now. Like, here's another one to throw at you. And luckily, at that point, honestly, like my husband, you know, I'm lucky enough that he did listen throughout the past 6 months before that of how I needed someone and how I needed to be. And he stepped up and he advocated like crazy for me. He advocated to our doctors for me. He helped me find the fertility clinic. He did so much, and he physically was there with me for the second one. So, you know, he drove me to the ER. He was there the whole entire time. He was advocating for me and our baby in the ER. And he really was this sounding board that I needed, you know. And at that second miscarriage, I was at almost a breaking point with my relationship with the Lord of just like, screw you. I don't trust you anymore. I can't continue trusting you. And my husband really stepped up and was just like, be broken, be faulty in your relationship with the Lord, and let me guide us. And like, let me be that for you. Let me be a rock while you're broken. And, you know, at that point in our marriage, it was not 50-50. It was 90% my husband and 10% me just showing up and doing what I could. And him really just saying, you do not have to heal right now. I will be this for you. And it was very healing for the both of us. But then, you know, through IUI, you're not having sex. You're not going on fancy date nights. You're not spicing things up and things like that. And so
trying new things.
Right. Like, oh, let's try this. Like, oh, I heard this is fun. Like, and so we tried really hard to make it, you know. And so like on the nights that I had to do my trigger shots, we made them kind of our like fancy splurge date nights. Like we would go to a really fancy restaurant, we would get dressed up, and we, you know, would come home and do my trigger shot. I say we, the first time we had our friend do it because I was like, I can't do a shot. And then the second time I did do it to myself, but we did make it these kind of date nights and these like special, you know, okay, this is what could bring us our baby. Let's make it special. And then a perk of, you know, one perk of IUI is they do encourage you to have sex the night of and the day after your IUI to help with the contractions in your uterus, to try and encourage the egg to meet the sperm. And so, you know, even though it was doctor's orders and planned, we did try to make those nights fun, and we did try to make those as spontaneous as they could be, even though we knew it had to happen. You know, so we would go on fun date nights, or we would go out with a ton of friends and come home and maybe have a little glass of wine or something and like try to spice things up. And then we also made it a like pact to the day before and the day of that I was supposed to take a pregnancy test. We kept ourselves super busy, and, you know, we kept ourselves surrounded by friends, surrounded by people we loved, doing things that we loved. That way we weren't just sitting around at home. Am I pregnant? Did it work? Am I pregnant? Waking up at 5 a.m. to take the pregnancy test. And so we did kind of make it this, you know, okay, what can we do to take our mind off of it and to have fun and to put ourselves in the best possible situation for if it doesn't work. You know, and when we found out we were pregnant the second time, we were in Glacier National Park with my dad photographing a wedding that I had. So
cue the video.
Yes.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
Really? You checked this morning?
Yeah.
Congratulations!
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Good job.
Did you bring it with
Son-in-law.
you? Congratulations.
That's so sweet.
Thank you.
So it was very special. And so, you know, we did things and we tried to time things to where it wasn't solely medical and it wasn't solely planned and it wasn't just, you know, oh, this is awful. And we also like leading up to your IUI, you're on your period, and then you're told to abstain from sex. And then you have the IUI, which is not sexy at all. And then you're told to have sex those next 2 days. So we kind of were like, well, we have 2 weeks till we find out if it works. Like, let's get sexy now. Like, let's make it intimate now. And, let's like try to keep the intimacy. Like, let's not just do, okay, we had our IUI, we had the 2 times of sex, we're done for the month. Like, let's try to continue this. And it worked for us, and it did help keep the intimacy between us, and it helped keep kind of our hopes a little bit higher and our hopes in one another higher as well.
I love that you just gave, I don't want to say tips and tricks, but that's kind of what I feel like it is. Maybe just advice for, say a woman is listening in or watching this and she's now going through that and she's struggling, and her husband are struggling with the same thing of, what do we do? How do we keep the intimacy, or even just the fact of like, this baby's coming from love, like from 2 parents and husband and wife who like are so in love and in it together. And not only in this, but how you honored your first 2 babies and with the tattoos, and you named them, like y'all did what worked for you guys to like process and heal and honor and remember them. And now on, in this side of it, trying to make it work through that process, through the hospital sterilization process, if you will, like, hey, we still have ways of staying together and making it work. But for those women who are listening, and something else you said was, hey, I really struggled with my relationship with Jesus during this. Like, I'm questioning, like, why are you making me go through this? It reminds me of in the Bible, God was like, Abraham, I'm going to give you a son, and the rest of the nation is going to come from him. And Abraham's like 100 years old, and he's like, so where's that son, God? And God's like, my timing, right? So walk us through, we talked about your relationship with your husband, but more importantly, right? Like how this affected your relationship with Jesus and where you're at now.